Hello everyone, welcome to Whispering Image. Today I am going to tell you real horror story. I was 11 years old. I experienced something that has haunted me into adulthood. It wasn't a nightmare, though I've tried to convince myself it was. It wasn't a story I heard from a friend or something I read. It was real. And to this day, I think about it every time I close my eyes in the dark. This is a memory that shaped me. And I'd be lying if I said I wasn't terrified to even share it with anyone. But here it is. I grew up in a small town in Pennsylvania. We lived in an older house, nothing special. Just the kind of two-story wooden home you'd see on a quiet, suburban street. The house had creaky floors, a narrow staircase, and a basement that always smelled faintly of dampness and rust. When I was a kid, I was afraid of two things: the basement and my closet. The basement made sense. It was dark. The light switch was far from the stairs, and my imagination filled it with every monster possible. But my closet, that was different. From about the age of 9, I noticed little things with it. Sometimes, I'd fall asleep with the closet door shut, but I'd wake up to it standing slightly open. My mom always told me it was the old wood shifting, and never thought more of it. But then things escalated. One night, when I was 10, I woke up around 2 a.m. to this faint scraping sound. It wasn't loud, but it came from inside my closet. My first thought was a mouse, but it went on, and on, like nails dragging against wood. Too steady, too deliberate. I remember clutching my blanket and squeezing my eyes shut until sleep took over again. The next morning, the closet was open. About a year later, I had the most disturbing night of my childhood. I remember it vividly because it was the first time I saw him. It was winter. I had fallen asleep early, and at some point in the night, I woke up very thirsty. My room was dimly lit because I always kept a nightlight plugged into the wall. As I sat up to grab my water bottle, I noticed the closet door was cracked wide open. My stomach sank. I froze, staring at that gap in the door. And then, through the narrow opening, I saw it. A face, pale, gaunt, with hollow eyes staring directly at me from the dark. The head was cocked slightly to one side, watching. I remember gasping so loud it echoed in the quiet. And in that split second, the door creaked a little farther open. The pale face slowly pulled back into the blackness of the closet until I could no longer see it. I did the only thing a terrified child could do. I shoved the blanket over my head, shaking and crying, telling myself I imagined it. Somehow, by some miracle, I must have fallen asleep. But when I woke up in the morning, the closet was shut completely. No one else was home that night. No one else could have done it. I never forgot that face. But what terrified me more was what happened when I told my older brother, Matt, a few days later. At first, he laughed and called me a baby. But then, as I kept describing the pale man with hollow eyes in my closet, he got really quiet. Finally, he said in a low voice, "I saw somebody in there too." I asked what he meant, and he told me that when he was around my age, he used to sleep in that same room before my parents switched things around. He told me he'd often wake up, see the closet door cracked open, and feel like someone was watching him. The worst part? He swore that once, late at night, he saw the door open slowly on its own, and a tall figure stepped halfway out before retreating back inside. Neither of us told our parents. We both agreed they wouldn't believe us. For the next few weeks, it became recurring: whispers, scraping, the door opening on its own. One time, I swear, I woke up to see the pale face, inches from the crack in the door, smiling. Something about that smile didn't feel human. It was stretched too wide, the lips thin and cracked. After that night, I started dragging my blankets into the hallway to sleep instead. My parents were frustrated, thinking I was going through a phase. They didn't understand what was happening to me, but it wasn't just me anymore. One weekend, my parents went out, leaving me and Matt home alone. I remember Matt saying he was going to play video games downstairs, and I should stop being scared of every little sound. Then, around midnight, the power flickered, and we heard it. From the basement, loud, deliberate footsteps, not the sound of a furnace kicking on, or the house settling. Steps, heavy, slow, moving across the basement floor. We both froze. Matt grabbed a baseball bat and whispered that we should check it out. I begged him not to, but he insisted. We tiptoed to the basement door. He swung it open and flicked the light switch. Nothing. Pitch black. And then, clear as day, we both heard whispering. Low, raspy, indecipherable whispers rising from the basement. Matt slammed the door shut, locked it, and we both bolted upstairs. He never teased me about being scared again after that night. The worst and final experience happened 2 weeks later. I fell asleep in bed, exhausted from school, only to wake up at 3 a.m. My nightlight flickered once and went out. The room was now bathed only in moonlight from the window. I turned my head and saw the closet door wide open. Before I could move, I saw the pale man step fully out of the closet. He was impossibly tall, his limbs too long, his head tilting unnaturally side to side as he moved. I couldn't scream. I couldn't breathe. He crouched down by my bed, his face level with mine now, smiling that stretched, unnatural grin. His hollow eyes flickered with something I can only describe as hunger. And then, in the faintest, driest whisper, he said something. You shouldn't be here. Before I could process, my door slammed open. My mom walked in, turning on the light, and the man vanished. The closet door was shut again, as if nothing had happened. I was sobbing uncontrollably, begging her to believe me. She told me it was a nightmare, that I needed sleep. But I know what I saw. Within the year, my parents moved me into a different room. Matt and I never went near that old closet again. Even now, as an adult, I can't sleep in a room with the closet door open. And sometimes, on the edge of sleep, I swear I see that pale face again peeking through a crack, waiting. I'll never forget what he whispered. And I'll never forgive whatever thing was in my closet that night. Because it wasn't a bad dream. It was real. And I think it still knows me. It's been almost 25 years since the summer my family almost didn't survive. This is a story I've barely told anyone sometimes because I'm not sure people will believe it. Sometimes because reliving it is almost unbearable. But I know there's at least one place where people come for the chilling, dark stories, the ones that shouldn't be true, but are. For those who listen at night, here's my most disturbing memory. I grew up on the outskirts of Missoula, Montana, surrounded by thick pine forests and lazy rivers. My parents loved the idea of getting away every summer, so for as long as I can remember, we'd pile into the family's dusty Honda and drive 2 hours north to my uncle's ancient log cabin near White Pine Lake. The cabin barely had electricity, no phone service, and it seemed like everything creaked: wood floors, rusty beds, doors that never quite fit the frame. It was the kind of place where the wind would rattle the windows and make you swear someone was outside. It was also a tradition, and I always looked forward to it. The summer I was 14, though 1999 was different. My uncle had passed away suddenly that spring, and the cabin felt emptier. My parents shouldered that grief in their own ways. But I could tell my mom in particular felt strange being there. She kept telling us to keep the doors locked, even during the day. The first 2 nights went by quietly. It was me, my parents, and my younger sister Maggie. I filled my hours fishing with my dad, reading on the weathered porch, and taking short hikes with Maggie. Sometimes, very late at night, I'd catch the beam of my dad's flashlight outside, circling the property before he'd return, locked up tight. It's hard to pinpoint exactly when the nightmare started. Maybe it was the third night. Maybe they'd always been lurking, and that place brought them out. I remember this dream so vividly even now. The moon hangs over the inky water, and in its reflection I see a figure tall, impossibly thin, drifting across the surface of the lake as if it weighed nothing. It turns to me, but it has no face, just a shadow darker than the night. It beckons with one hand, its fingers too long, reaching. Every time in the dream that I tried to scream, my voice disappeared. I'd wake up drenched in sweat, heart beating in my ears, every sound magnified by midnight silence. I tried not to tell anyone, but the next morning at breakfast, Maggie whispered, "The shadow's outside." She was only 10. When I pressed her, she said she'd had a bad dream about something tapping her window. Our bedrooms faced the woods behind the cabin, and just past those trees was White Pine Lake. I was old enough to play it off, but her voice still haunts me. It watches all night. That day, my mom found scratches on Maggie's window. It looked like small branches had scraped the glass, except the marks were thin, parallel, and dragged sideways across the pane. "It's the wind, or maybe a raccoon," my dad said, though his tight jaw told me he didn't believe it. Later that afternoon, I watched him walk around the outside of the house, peering under bushes and into the thick line of trees that led down to the shore. That night, none of us slept well. The air felt heavy and charged, the way the world feels before lightning. Sometime after midnight, I sat up at the sound of footsteps on the porch. I held my breath, listening, counting 1, 2, 3 slow steps before hearing the unmistakable rattle of the doorknob. My bed was near the bedroom window, and as I slid out of the sheets, I peeked between the curtains. Something moved just beyond the porch light, a shadow that didn't belong to anything solid. I blinked, trying to convince myself it was nothing, but deep inside, I sensed I was being watched. The next morning, a cold drizzle fell. My parents said they were taking the boat into town for supplies, and told Maggie and me to stay indoors. We did as we were told, for the most part. That was the morning Maggie found the journal. It was tucked into a drawer under the old bunk bed, wrapped in a stained bandana. On the cover, in faded ink, was my uncle's name. The pages were a mess of notes, fishing logs, lists of supplies, and then something stranger. There were multiple entries where my uncle described something watching the house and moving between the trees after midnight. He referred to it as the Shadow Man. One entry, dated the previous summer, read, "He's getting braver. Last night I saw him standing at the edge of the water, arms open, waiting. I locked up, but I don't think that's going to help. I told Mary not to come alone with the kids anymore. If you're reading this, don't listen when he calls your name in the dark." Maggie wanted to tell our parents, but I stuffed the journal back into the drawer, told her it was just a prank, and tried to shake it off. That night was the worst so far. The rain had stopped, and the air felt thick and still almost suffocating. Around 2 a.m., I woke to the sound of someone softly knocking on the window nearest my bed. It was a gentle, precise knock, not like branches or rain. I slid off the mattress and went over, heart in my throat. The porch light was still on, but the glass reflected only my face. I pressed my ear against the wet pane, listening. Then, another knock from the far side of the house. Suddenly, Maggie cried out from her room. I raced down the short hallway and threw open the door. She was standing in the corner, her eyes wide, her voice a strangled whisper. "He's at the window." He called my name. I barely had time to comfort her before the power died pitch black. Sudden silence. We huddled together in the hallway, not daring to move. My dad stumbled out of his room with a flashlight, my mom right behind him. He forced his way through the cabin, checking every window, every door. Maggie pressed against my side the entire time. By the first weak light of dawn, the power flickered back. We all pretended nothing had happened, but the tension hung thick in the air. My dad claimed it was just a power failure, a raccoon or a local messing with us. But no one truly believed it. That afternoon, Maggie refused to come outside. I tried to fish, but the woods felt different, heavier, like something was pushing down on the whole world. Near the edge of the property, I found tracks in the soft dirt that looked human but longer, narrower. Every pine needle and branch seemed bent toward those prints, as if terrified. When I followed them to the lake shore, I spotted a patch of bare earth where the tall reeds had been trampled flat. There, pressed into the damp soil, was the impression of a hand, elongated fingers, claw marks dug deep. I stepped away, swore never to return. That night, a storm whipped the lake into fury. Trees thrashed, wind shrieked, thunder cracked. The house shook. Somewhere after midnight, the wind died abruptly. In the unnatural quiet, we heard it, whispering at the back door. At first, I thought it was my imagination, but everyone heard it, the soft hiss of a voice, calling all of our names, over and over. The doorknob rattled. Maggie screamed. My father ran for the shotgun kept above the mantel, but as he reached for it, all the windows in the cabin exploded outward at once, an eruption of glass, the wood frame splintering inwards. Wind rushed through the house, but worse than the wind was what came with it, a coldness so deep it burned, and that endless, inhuman whisper, "Open the door." Through the swirling darkness and rain, I saw the shadow outside the ruined window, towering, arms open, impossibly wide. Its face was still a blank void, but now, beneath the shadow, dozens of faint, pale hands reached up from the ground and grasped at its legs, like roots desperate to pull it back to the underworld. My mother screamed, clutched Maggie tight. My dad yelled for us to run, but the front door was gone, torn off its hinges. A wind colder than winter swept through, and the shadow entered, filling the hallway. It stretched along the walls and floor, moving silently, smoothly, as if it could fill every corner of the house at once. Somehow, in the chaos, I remembered the words in my uncle's journal. Don't listen when he calls your name in the dark. The shadow's whisper grew louder, urgent, pressing right against my skull. It said my name in every voice I recognized, my mom's, my dad's, Maggie's, even my late uncle's. Each time, I felt the pull to turn, to step closer to the shadow, to give in. But I covered my ears, squeezed my eyes shut, and screamed over the noise. Maggie did the same. My parents, I'm not sure what they did, but something else happened then, a sound like church bells, far away, and the shadow recoiled, letting off the most inhuman wail I'd ever heard. Amid the blast of the storm and the screaming, the kitchen clock fell off the wall and shattered. As if that tiny event broke the spell, the wind stopped, and the shadow retreated, shrinking, growing thinner, evaporating into mist. When we opened our eyes, the dawn's light was creeping over the lake. The shadow was gone. We left the cabin that morning and never went back. My father sold the property within the year, and we tried to pretend it never happened. But every one of us carries scars. For years, I'd hear my name whispered at night, always just as I was falling asleep. Sometimes, I'll see long, finger-shaped marks on windows, or find the air in a room suddenly, unnaturally cold. My mother still refuses to talk about what happened, and Maggie has spent a lifetime avoiding lakes entirely. 3 years ago, the people who bought the cabin tried to track us down. Their letter, left unanswered, whispered about things seen at the water's edge, about shadows and windows, and voices calling in the night. If you ever rent a cabin deep in the woods and find an old journal, read it. And if you hear a voice whispering in the night, calling you by name, don't listen. I know what's still out there, waiting by White Pine Lake. And I wouldn't wish our story on anyone. All of us have places from childhood we're told to stay away from. For me and my friends, it was the empty house at 129 Redwood Avenue. The story I'm about to tell you isn't just a scary neighborhood rumor. I'd give anything to believe that's all it was. But even now, as an adult, I'll sometimes wake up shaking, convinced I can still hear footsteps in my room, footsteps that shouldn't be there. I grew up in a mid-sized American suburb, wide sidewalks, endless rows of maples, streetlights that cast long yellow shadows in summer. By the time I was 10, most of us in the neighborhood had heard about 129 Redwood. The house looked normal, more or less, except it was always empty. Faded blue siding, broken porch swing, windows coated with grime. Nobody had lived there since before I was born, but every kid had a story. The ghost of a little girl in the upstairs window, old Mr. Haskins going crazy after spending a night inside. Police tape nobody remembered being removed. Mostly, our parents just told us not to go near it. Rotten floorboards. Dangerous. But that only made the place more interesting. By 6th grade, my friends and I, Alex, Brian, and Clara, had established our own code of bravery. To be in the group, you had to stand on the front porch of 129 Redwood and knock 3 times. Daylight only, of course. We'd all done it. Nothing ever happened. But at night, the house changed. Even the oldest kids on the block wouldn't go near it after dark. The summer I turned 11, Alex started pushing for more. "Let's go in," he said, their voice trying to mask the quiver of fear. I wanted to say no, to play it off as childish, but I could tell the group was watching me. So, against every instinct, I agreed. We'd sneak in together 1 hour, tops, and we'd bring flashlights just in case. We chose the last Friday evening in July. My parents thought I was at Alex's house for a sleepover. I wish I'd never lied. We met up just before midnight, flashlights tucked into backpack pockets. My heart was thudding so loud I was sure it would echo. The neighborhood was dead silent, not even a breeze. The only sound was Brian's nervous laugh, which faded the closer we got. When we reached the porch, the air felt suddenly colder, and there was a faint, musty smell, like wet paper and old dirt. The porch boards groaned under our weight, but we slipped around to the back door, which everyone knew was always unlocked. Inside, the house felt impossibly still. Our lights cast skinny beams, illuminating warped wallpaper and dust, so thick it looked like a pillow had exploded. The living room was empty, except for a broken armchair and a shattered lamp in the corner. The creepiest part, though, was how there was no sign of animals. No spiders, no insects, nothing. Just absolute, unnatural silence. We split up, pretending to be braver than we were. Alex and Brian drifted toward the kitchen, daring each other to open cabinets and check the basement door. Clara and I stayed in the living room, drawn to the staircase the way a snake is drawn to warmth. Halfway up the stairs, we heard a loud thump from upstairs, like something fallen or dropped. I wanted to turn back, but Clara's hand clenched around mine. "Let's just see," she whispered. We stepped onto the landing. The hallway felt wrong, somehow longer than the house could possibly be from the outside. The first door on our right was barely hanging on its hinges. I nudged it open. Empty, except for, on the far wall, a child's mural, badly faded. Painted trees, stick figures, and what looked like a big red sun, all scrawled in shakier lines. That mural is burned into my memory, because as our flashlight beams passed over it, for just a second, I thought I saw one of the little painted stick figures move. Downstairs, the boys yelled they'd found the entrance to the basement. At first, we all pretended to laugh, but the sound rang flat. Still, we regrouped, drawn together by the darkness, not out of curiosity, but safety. The basement door was shut tight, unlike everything else in the house. Brian tried the knob, but it spun, stuck. He started thumping it with his palm, and that's when we all heard it, clear as day. Something shuffling around on the basement steps. Not a raccoon, not a breeze. Something heavy, something breathing. We froze, the four of us pressing together, listening. The breathing got louder, raspy, wet, and then stopped abruptly, as if whatever it was sensed us. I felt a pressure in my head, like hands squeezing the sides of my skull. Alex whispered, "We should go." But just as we turned to leave, the kitchen lights snapped on. Every bulb glared, impossibly bright. Even though the house had been cut off from power for years, we staggered out of the hallway, shielding our eyes, and every light in the house blinked out at once, leaving us in total, suffocating dark. We scrambled for our flashlights. In the panic, Clara tripped and fell against an old mirror propped against a hallway wall. The mirror toppled and, as it hit the floor, didn't shatter, just rocked. And the glass rippled like a pond. I grabbed Clara, helping her up, and that's when I saw it. For just a second, in the reflection, the hallway behind us was crowded with shadowy figures, tall and thin, hands pressed against the glass. They weren't visible in the beam of the flashlight, only in the mirror, staring back at us with faces like pits, just empty, dark holes. One of the figures raised its hand in the mirror, and at that very instant, we heard a low, ugly moaning coming from upstairs. Brian screamed. Alex dropped his flashlight. The beam spun around, revealing wild, jerky movement at the top of the stairs, a figure crawling unnaturally fast toward us, head twisted at a sickening angle. We bolted toward the front door. As we did, every room we passed seemed to fill with cold, dense air. The curtain in the living room billowed, but the windows stayed tight and shut. The front doorknob wouldn't budge, like it was being held from the other side. Clara banged and screamed for help, but the street outside remained silent, each house dark and indifferent. I looked over my shoulder. Upstairs, the crawling figure was gone. For a moment, I hoped maybe it had just been a trick of the broken flashlight, but then came the sound of bare feet slapping the stairs, followed by wet, ragged breathing right behind us. The only way left was the way we came, in the back door. We sprinted through the kitchen. Right as we passed the basement door, it crashed open. A cold wind hissed up, nearly knocking us over. And for just an instant, the smell of wet earth and rot was overwhelming. Against the darkness inside, something darker rose out of the stairwell, a mass of slithering shadows. Pale faces flickering within, mouths open in silent, endless screams. We all made it to the back porch together, except Alex, who was pulled up short just inside the door. Something invisible, cold and crushing, was holding them. Brian and I grabbed Alex's arms, yanking as hard as we could. Clara screamed their name, and in the rushing wind, we heard dozens of voices whispering at once, blending together in a nightmare chorus. "Don't go, don't go, stay with us." Just as Alex's legs buckled and they started to slip backwards, Brian lunged forward and struck something unseen. Whatever it was recoiled with a whimper, and we all tumbled out onto the porch and into the grass. We didn't stop running until we skidded to a halt at the corner of Redwood Avenue. Only then, gasping and trembling, did we dare look back. The house was utterly dark, but as we watched, our eyes catching every movement, I saw, swear to God, a girl standing in the upper window, shadowed by the yellow glow of the streetlight. She was staring right at us, face pressed to the pane, hands slowly rising and waving goodbye. Clara claims she saw her smile. Alex says it wasn't a girl at all, but a thing with the shape of a child and a face like a shattered mask. The police came, of course, after Brian's parents saw us running home late and hysterical. But when they searched the house, they said nothing was out of place except for the broken mirror in the hallway and our scattered flashlights. No power, no intruders, just dust and drafts. We never told the whole truth. After that night, Alex moved away. Brian stopped talking to the rest of us entirely. Clara and I tried to carry on, but I knew she never slept with the lights off again. I hoped that was the end of it. But in the weeks that followed, strange things happened in our homes. Clara woke up one night to see damp, child-sized handprints on her bedroom window, inside the glass. I started hearing scratching beneath my bed at night, and the whispering always at 3:09 a.m., insisting I come back to play. Once, during a thunderstorm, I caught my own reflection flickering in the bathroom mirror, and just behind me, a tall, dark figure with its hands on my shoulders. We tried to tell ourselves it would fade with time, but I know now, the house at 129 Redwood never lets go of its visitors. 5 years later, when I was 16, I went back. I thought confronting the house might end the nightmares. I trespassed one last time, holding my phone's flashlight, praying none of the neighbors saw me. The house seemed unchanged. I stayed in the entryway, refusing to go further, and called out into the darkness, "You don't belong in my life anymore. Leave us alone." At first, there was nothing, just silence. But as I took one last step back onto the porch, a hot, fetid wind blew out from inside, passing right through me, and I thought I heard a little girl's voice in my ear. "See you soon." I left, and never went back. The house was finally torn down a few years ago, but all of us who survived that night still wake up, sometimes convinced we've heard something or someone lurking just outside our childhood bedroom doors. If a house near you sits empty for years, and you feel it watching, trust your instincts. Don't try to be brave. Some places keep their own secrets, and some doors should never be opened. If this story had you on edge, comment your creepiest childhood memories below, and subscribe for more real horror. Sleep well, if you can.